Welcome to FearBound Stories. Please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now let's begin. Daniel and Marissa had dreamed of this trip for years. After months of stressful work schedules, late nights, and bills piling up, they wanted a real escape, the kind of vacation people write about in postcards. White sand, turquoise waters, nothing but calm. On their third morning, while browsing the docks for excursions, they met a local named Captain Ruiz. His boat wasn't flashy like the other tourist charters, but he promised something different. "I know places tourists never see," he said, his voice low as if sharing a secret. "Islands that aren't on any map, untouched, but..." He paused, scanning the sea. "You mustn't stay long. The ocean remembers trespassers." Daniel's eyes lit up. He loved the idea of something exclusive, something secret. Marissa hesitated, but Ruiz's price was fair, and Daniel's enthusiasm wore her down. They agreed. The morning of the trip, the weather was perfect. The sun shimmered across calm waves, and Ruiz's small boat cut smoothly through the water. Dolphins surfaced, their sleek bodies glinting in the light. For an hour it felt like paradise, but then, as if someone had flipped a switch, the world changed. The sky darkened. A wall of fog rolled across the water, swallowing the horizon. Ruiz cursed, fiddling with his compass. The needle spun wildly. "This isn't right," he muttered. And then, out of the mist, the island appeared. It wasn't like the others they had passed. Its sand was black, almost like ash. The trees grew too close together, tangled into unnatural shapes. High cliffs loomed at the far side, their edges jagged like teeth. Ruiz paled. "We shouldn't be here." But Daniel leaned forward, fascinated. "Just an hour, we'll look around." Marissa shook her head, but Ruiz cut the engine anyway. "1 hour, he warned. "If you're late, I leave without you." His tone made her uneasy. They stepped off the boat, the sand strangely cold beneath their feet. The island was silent. No bird calls, no waves crashing, no rustle of leaves. The kind of silence that feels wrong, like the world holding its breath. They followed a narrow path inland. The deeper they went, the heavier the air felt, damp and metallic like the scent of blood. Carvings appeared on stones, spirals, distorted faces, wide staring eyes. Daniel ran his hand over one. "Probably tribal art," he said, but his voice trembled. Then he froze. "Did you hear that?" A whisper, soft, drawn out. It said his name. They pressed on until the jungle opened into a clearing. At the center stood a blackened stone altar. Scattered around it were seashells, hundreds of them. Marissa knelt to pick one up, her breath caught. Inside, scratched deep into the shell's surface, was her name. She dropped it with a gasp. Daniel picked another, his name. They searched the pile, dozens of shells, each etched with names. Some fresh, sharp and white. Others cracked, faded, as if ancient. The air filled with whispers, louder now. The trees shifted. Figures appeared between them. Tall, gaunt, their faces hidden beneath masks of seashells fused together. They didn't walk, they swayed like seaweed underwater. The altar shook, shells rattling violently. Daniel clutched his ears, but the voices pierced through. Words formed now. "Stay. Join. Forever." Marissa grabbed his arm and ran. But the jungle didn't let them. Every path twisted back to the clearing. Every desperate sprint ended with the altar before them. The shell-covered figures inched closer. Finally, with raw desperation, Marissa dragged Daniel through the thick undergrowth. Branches cut their skin, vines wrapped at their ankles, but somehow they broke through to the shore. Ruiz was waiting, his face pale, sweat pouring down his brow. He hauled them aboard without a word and started the engine. "You heard the voices, didn't you?" he asked hoarsely. Daniel nodded, trembling. "Once it knows your name," Ruiz whispered, "you belong to it." Back at the hotel, Daniel tried to laugh it off. We were tired, spooked, that's all. But at 3:07 a.m., Marissa woke to find him standing on the balcony, eyes fixed on the ocean, lips moving. When she touched his arm, he whispered, "They're calling." Over the next days, strange things followed them. Daniel woke with scratches on his arms, letters carved into his skin. The first word was home. Then soon, seashells began appearing in their room, on the dresser, in their shoes, inside their luggage, each with Daniel's name etched inside. One had hers. On their flight home, Marissa felt relief. The mainland, the safety of crowds. But as the plane soared over the ocean, Daniel pressed his forehead to the glass, whispering again. When she asked what he saw, his answer made her blood run cold. "The island," he said softly. "It's still there, waiting." Weeks later, back in the city, Marissa tried to forget, until one morning she opened the bathroom cabinet. Inside, sitting neatly on the shelf, was a black seashell. Her name carved inside, fresh. And when she held it to her ear, she didn't hear the ocean. She heard chanting, dozens of voices, calling her name. Before we move on to the next story, give us your verdict on this one. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Michael never planned on staying at the Ocean View Hotel. His flight had been delayed, and after hours of waiting, rebooking, and frustration, he wanted nothing more than a bed. The Ocean View was the only vacancy nearby. From the outside, the building looked forgotten by time. Cracked stucco walls, iron balconies eaten by rust, and a neon sign that sputtered faintly in the salt air. Inside, the lobby had the same faded grandeur. A massive chandelier hung above, but half the bulbs were burnt out. The red carpet was threadbare. A faint smell of mildew clung to the air. The receptionist, a thin woman with hollow cheeks, barely looked at him as she slid over a key. "Room 604, she said. Then, as though reciting a script, she added, "Take the elevator. Do not use the stairs at night." Michael raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" Her eyes flicked up at him briefly. "Because at night the stairs don't end." The elevator groaned as it rose, its brass panels tarnished, the cracked mirror on the back wall splitting his reflection in two. On the 6th floor, he stepped into a hallway lined with faded red carpet. The lights buzzed and flickered. Room 604 was at the very end. The key fit, but the door resisted before swinging open. Inside, the room was old but clean. Heavy curtains blocked out the sea view. The bed sagged in the middle. He didn't care. Within minutes, he was asleep. At 3:11 a.m., the phone rang. Michael jolted awake. When he answered, there was only static, but beneath it, faintly, unmistakably, the chime of an elevator bell. The next morning, he asked about it at the desk. The receptionist's smile faltered. "You answered?" she whispered. Before he could press her, another guest shuffled past, an older man, pale and sunken, dragging a battered suitcase. He glanced at Michael and muttered, "Don't go above the 6th floor." Michael turned to ask what he meant, but the man was already gone. That night, after wandering the beach town, Michael returned to the hotel. The lobby was nearly empty, save for a bellhop dozing in a corner. He pressed the elevator button. The doors opened, groaning. Inside, the panel glowed weakly. He pressed 6. The elevator shuddered. It passed the 6th floor. 7, 8, 9. Michael frowned. He pressed door open, lobby, anything. The panel flickered. Then 13. The doors opened into darkness. At first, he thought it was a maintenance floor. The walls were raw concrete, pipes exposed, the floor damp. Then his eyes adjusted. People stood there, dozens of them motionless. Men in old suits, women in dated dresses, children holding toys. Their skin was gray, their eyes sunken. They turned their heads toward him in unison. Every one of them smiled. Michael's breath caught. He slammed the close button, heart racing. The figures stepped forward, their mouths opened together in a silent scream. The doors slid shut. Back in his room, he barely slept. The air felt thick, heavy. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls. The cracked mirror in the bathroom showed him, and behind him, for a fraction of a second, a pale woman standing in the doorway. At 3:11, the phone rang again. This time, he didn't answer, but the bell chimed anyway. On the third day, Michael tried to check out. The receptionist looked at his key, then at him. "Once you've seen the upper floors," she said softly, "you can't leave. The hotel knows you now." That night, he tried the stairs instead of the elevator. He descended floor after floor. Lobby signs, basement signs, boiler room signs. And still the stairs went down. The numbers painted on the doors grew strange. He realized with horror that the receptionist had been right. At night, the stairs never ended. Finally, gasping, he turned back. But when he pushed through a door to return to his floor, he wasn't on the 6th. He was on 13. The hallway stretched long and endless. The pale guests lined both sides, silent, waiting. He ran back into the stairwell, and suddenly he was back on 6. Room 604. His door stood open. Inside, the bed was made, his suitcase neatly packed. And on the nightstand, the phone rang. 3:11 a.m. On the 5th night, Michael broke. He stormed to the lobby and demanded answers. The receptionist looked exhausted, her voice shaking. This hotel was rebuilt after the fire of 1928. 13 guests died, trapped when the elevator shaft collapsed. Their floor was never supposed to exist, but at night, the hotel remembers. Michael begged her to let him leave. She only shook her head. "They've already claimed you, that's why the bell rings." That night, the elevator waited for him. Its doors stood open in the lobby, though no one had pressed the button. Inside, the cracked mirror reflected not just him, but a crowd of pale faces behind him, smiling, waiting. The doors began to close. Michael backed away, shaking his head. But the bell chimed. Ding. 14. And he realized with horror that the hotel was building more floors. For him. Before we move on to the next story, give us your verdict on this one. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Emma, Tyler, Marissa, and Josh had been talking about this mountain trip for over a year. 4 friends escaping the endless grind of work and city life, hoping for nothing more than crisp air, long hikes, and quiet nights without buzzing phones. The cabin they rented was advertised as historic, a relic from the 1800s, perched high on a ridge with breathtaking valley views. To them, it looked straight out of a postcard. Wood beams, stone fireplace, deer antlers on the wall, and shelves of dusty books that hadn't been opened in decades. They picked up the keys from a caretaker at the trailhead. He was an older man, thin, with a voice so soft they had to lean in to hear. He handed over the keys without ceremony. Then, before they walked away, he added in a tone that seemed more warning than hospitality. "If the clocks stop, do not be inside after midnight." Josh chuckled, muttering something about mountain superstition, but the man's eyes were dead serious. The first day passed in bliss. They hiked a nearby trail, cooked a massive dinner, and played board games by the crackling fire. The cabin felt cozy, wrapped in golden lamplight. That night, as the fire burned low and their laughter faded into yawns, Tyler noticed the mantel clock had stopped. 3:07 a.m. "Battery's probably dead," he said casually, though when they checked their phones, every screen froze at the same time. The fire dimmed unnaturally. The air grew thick, damp, like the pressure before a thunderstorm. Then came the sound. Heavy, deliberate footsteps overhead. But the cabin didn't have an attic. By morning, time worked again. Phones ticked forward, the clocks resumed, and sunlight poured through the windows as if nothing had happened. They convinced themselves it was exhaustion, maybe even the altitude. But on the second night, it returned. The clocks froze, their phones froze, watches stopped mid-second. The footsteps returned, louder this time, pacing above them. Emma clutched Tyler's arm. "It's just the roof settling," she whispered, though her eyes said otherwise. The footsteps descended a staircase. But the cabin had no staircase. On the third night, they prepared. They left cameras running, recorders on every table. They sat by the fire, waiting. At 3:07, the flame flickered, then dimmed. The recorders clicked off. Every device died at once. The footsteps began again, not just above, but all around, circling the cabin. The front door creaked open. Freezing air rushed inside, though the door still appeared locked. And the old photographs lining the walls changed. The Stern family portraits blurred, their faces melted away, replaced with eyeless smears. In one frame, a new face appeared, Emma's. The next day, panic set in. They tried to leave, but every path wound back to the cabin. Trails that should have led down the mountain circled endlessly. Josh swore they were being led in circles, but Emma noticed something worse. The clocks hadn't started again. All day long, they remained frozen at 3:07. The sun moved across the sky, but the shadows on the cabin walls didn't. Time itself was wrong. That night, the air pressed in on them like a weight. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the floorboards. The clocks began to tick backward, 1 second at a time. The fire blew out. The footsteps thundered inside now, shaking the walls. And the photographs updated again. This time, all 4 of them were there, eyes scratched out. The fourth night was chaos. Josh tried smashing the clocks, but the pieces still read 3:07. Marissa screamed when she found her phone etched with the numbers. Tyler swore he saw a shadow figure in the corner, tall and still, watching them with no face. And Emma began to change. She sleepwalked, standing before the mantel clock, whispering, "It's almost time." Her voice wasn't her own. By the 5th night, the cabin no longer hid its curse. The walls bled condensation. The photographs showed scenes that hadn't yet happened. Tyler hanging by a rope, Josh clawing at the floor, Marissa staring blankly from the window. The footsteps no longer waited. They stormed into the room. Invisible weight crushed them to the floor, forcing them down as the clock spun faster and faster backward. Then silence. Days later, the caretaker returned to check the property. The cabin was empty. No luggage, no sign of struggle. On the mantel, the clock was still stuck at 3:07. And on the walls, the photographs had changed one last time. The caretaker's family stood where they always had. But behind them, Emma, Tyler, Marissa, and Josh smiled. Their eyes were black voids, and beneath the picture, the date was scratched in, 3:07 a.m. Before we move on to the next story, give us your verdict on this one. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Lila always loved souvenirs. Since childhood, she had filled her shelves with trinkets from every trip. Seashells, keychains, bracelets, small wooden carvings. To her, they weren't just objects, but memories she could touch. Her friends teased her about it. You don't travel for the sights, you travel for more clutter. But she didn't care. Collecting souvenirs made her trips feel complete. When she booked a solo vacation to South America, she promised herself she'd return with something special. Something unlike anything else she owned. She found it on the 3rd day. It was late evening when she wandered into the old quarter of the city. The streets narrowed, the neon lights of tourist shops fading until only dim lanterns flickered. At the very end was a market that seemed almost hidden, a place that looked older than the city itself. The stalls weren't brightly decorated like the others. They were dark, shadowy, and crowded with strange objects. Animal bones tied with string, worn books with pages missing, masks carved from wood so dark it looked like stone. Lila moved slowly between them, her steps echoing oddly in the tight passage. One mask in particular made her stop. It was small, but unsettling. Carved with exaggerated features, its hollow eyes seemed deeper than its size allowed, and its grin stretched too wide, filled with jagged teeth that looked carved with unusual care. When she leaned closer, the vendor appeared. A woman wrapped in layered shawls, her eyes clouded as though blind. "You see it?" the woman rasped. Lila startled. "Yeah, it's beautiful. How much?" The woman shook her head. "It already knows you. You cannot leave it behind." Lila tried to laugh. "Everything's for sale." But the woman only pushed the mask toward her. "If you don't carry it, it will follow." Uneasy, Lila dropped some bills into the woman's hand and slipped the mask into her bag. Back at her hotel, she propped it on the desk. The eyes looked deeper in the dim light, as if the hollow carved space stretched far beyond the wood. She slept uneasily that night. Her dream was vivid. She was back in the market, but every stall was empty. Every table bore only the same mask, rows and rows of them, all facing her, all grinning. She woke with a start, sweat dripping down her neck. The mask still sat on the desk, but it was angled toward the bed. She swore she hadn't left it that way. The rest of her vacation passed, but she couldn't shake her unease. She considered leaving the mask behind in the hotel, but when she picked it up, its grin seemed wider, almost daring her to try. So she brought it home. The first days were uneventful. She placed it neatly on her souvenir shelf. But soon strange things began. At night she heard faint whispers, at first too soft to understand, then clearer. They called her name, Lila. She brushed it off as exhaustion. But then objects began moving. A picture frame tilted. A chair scraped an inch across the floor. She dreamed of people she didn't know, their faces twisted into the mask's jagged grin. And when she woke, the mask had moved. From the shelf to her desk. From her desk to the kitchen counter, always facing her. By the third night, she woke to the sound of wood scraping across the floor. The mask was upright in her bedroom doorway. She screamed, turned on the light. It was lying flat on the floor, but she knew she'd seen it standing. She tried to get rid of it. She wrapped it in bags and dumped it in the garbage bin outside. The next morning, it was back on her shelf. The grin looked wider. She tried again, this time dropping it off in a donation box across town. That night, it sat on her nightstand, waiting. Panic rising, she tried fire. She doused it in lighter fluid and set it alight in a metal barrel. The flames roared high, but the wood never blackened, never cracked. When the fire died, the mask sat untouched. The grin glistened in the ashes. The following week was torment. The whispers grew constant, no longer calling her name. They laughed, high-pitched and cruel. She stopped sleeping. Whenever she drifted off, she felt weight pressing on her chest. She opened her eyes to find the mask beside her pillow. Sometimes it hung from the ceiling above her, swaying gently. The air in her apartment grew heavy. Lights flickered. Shadows moved independently of their sources. She thought she saw faces reflected in the windows, dozens of them grinning like the mask. Desperate, she dug through her belongings until she found the vendor's receipt. It listed an address and a crude email. She wrote frantically, begging to return it. The reply came hours later. "It chose you. It cannot be returned. Feed it or it will feed on you." Lila froze. Feed it? She ignored the message, but the nightmares worsened. She dreamed of herself wearing the mask, her body jerking unnaturally as she grinned with its wooden teeth. She began waking in strange places, standing in the kitchen, in the hallway, sometimes holding the mask against her own face. Her hands bled from splinters. She didn't remember putting it there. Her best friend Naomi grew concerned. One evening, Naomi insisted on staying over. Lila reluctantly agreed. At 3 a.m., Naomi woke to a scream. She saw Lila in the corner, holding the mask tight against her face, her body convulsing as if something else was pulling her strings. Naomi rushed over, ripping the mask away. Lila collapsed, gasping, her eyes wide and glassy. The mask hit the floor, and for just a moment Naomi swore its hollow eyes blinked. Terrified, Naomi dragged Lila out of the apartment. They stayed in a hotel the rest of the night. But when they returned the next day with help, the apartment was bare. No furniture, no clothes, no sign Lila had ever lived there. Only one thing lay in the middle of the floor. A piece of paper, jagged handwriting scratched across it. It already knows you. Before we move on to the next story, give us your verdict on this one. And don't forget to like and subscribe. For Emma and David, the resort felt like paradise. An all-inclusive package. Unlimited food, tropical beaches, cocktails by the pool, and staff so friendly it almost felt unnatural. After a stressful year, it seemed like the perfect escape. Their room overlooked the ocean. White curtains billowed with the breeze, palm trees swayed below, and the sound of waves lulled them into sleep that first night. The next morning, they packed, ready to check out and head to the next stop on their trip. But when they opened the door, their suitcases were neatly unpacked, clothes folded back into drawers, shoes lined against the wall. The concierge knocked cheerfully a few minutes later. "Your stay has been extended. Breakfast is waiting." Emma frowned. "We didn't ask for that." The concierge's smile never faltered. "You'll find everything is taken care of." At first, they shrugged it off. Maybe a mix-up, maybe a courtesy. They decided to enjoy one more day. But when they returned to the lobby to check out again, the receptionist looked puzzled. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Your package is still active. You can't leave until it concludes." David bristled. "When does it conclude?" She smiled wider. "When you're finished." That night, Emma noticed something strange. All the guests were the same as yesterday. Same faces at dinner, same families by the pool, same couple at the bar. And they weren't just similar. They wore the same clothes. They ate the same meals. They laughed at the same jokes. The third day, Emma tried something different. She skipped the buffet, stayed in her room. When she came down later, she froze. At the table near the window sat herself, or someone who looked exactly like her, eating the same plate of food she had avoided, smiling the same way. The moment Emma gasped, the double vanished. No one else seemed to notice. They decided to leave by force. They packed their bags, dragged them to the gates. But outside the resort was only jungle. Every road they tried led back to the lobby. Every path circled to the beach. The world outside was gone. That night, the staff held a special dinner in the ballroom. Every guest attended, faces frozen in wide smiles. The waiters poured wine endlessly, and the music looped the same haunting melody over and over. When Emma whispered to David that they needed to escape, a waiter leaned close. "You can't leave hungry," he said with a grin. The fourth night was worse. Emma woke to find David standing on the balcony, staring at the waves. "They want us here," he said dreamily. "They're giving us everything. Why fight it?" His eyes were glazed, his smile too wide. The next morning, David was gone. His suitcase, his clothes, everything vanished. The staff told Emma not to worry. He's simply enjoying his stay. She searched frantically. By the pool, in the dining hall, on the beach. And then she saw him, among the waiters carrying trays, smiling that same unnatural smile. His eyes found hers, but he didn't move. Emma begged the staff to let her go. The receptionist tilted her head. "You'll stay until you're finished. That's the promise." Emma screamed that she never made such a promise. The woman's smile deepened. "You did, when you checked in." The days blurred. Emma stopped counting. Every morning her suitcase was neatly unpacked. Every night the same dinner, the same music, the same guests. Sometimes she saw her reflection in mirrors, smiling when she wasn't. Sometimes she swore the walls pulsed, like the resort itself was alive. One night she tried again to escape. She ran into the jungle barefoot, her lungs burning. She didn't stop until her legs gave out. When she opened her eyes, she was in bed. The curtains fluttered, the ocean roared. On the nightstand sat a card. "We're glad you're enjoying your stay." The caretaker who returned months later to check the resort found it spotless. Staff smiling, guests laughing, everything perfect. But he noticed something odd. In the framed photos lining the lobby, new guests had been added, their faces smiling too wide, and among them, Emma and David, forever checked in. You've just crossed the boundary between reality and the unknown. If you felt the fear tonight, make sure to subscribe before you leave, because on this channel, every story is just the beginning. New nightmares arrive every few nights, each one darker than the last. Until then, keep your lights low, your doors locked, and your mind open. You are now part of the FearBound family.